Ooh. The boss. Do you think there's any chance that Sadie knows what song this is?
I would say very low likelihood that either one of them even know who that is.
All right, well, we'll see. We'll probably get some texts on that. So, wait, I'm going to start off with just maybe a sore subject for you, okay? I'm going to read off some numbers. Are you ready for these?
Yes.
2020, 257 to 242. 2019, 278 to 212. 2018, 409 to 254. 2017, 222 to 145. I'm going to skip 16 because you won that one handily. 2015, 210 to 175. 2014, 252 to 217. And 2013, 255 to 239. It's a pretty strong level of ineptitude weight against me here the last 8 years. That's an average victory of me of 39 points per game, 258 to 219. And in 2017, my team was awful and still beat you by about 80. I was 3-11 that year. So, Wade, what's going on? Why can't the RFB show up against Rockford?
That's a good question. I would like to know the same thing you would. I think it would help if I could start a defense that could score more than about 5 points a week. That would make a nice contribution.
It's a long list of 5-point defenses, though. You did get me pretty good in 2016, although I think everybody in the SKFL did that year. So transitioning from 1-7 against Rockford, and I would have gone back further, but everybody's team names, I forgot who was who. So Casey would probably be able to do a little bit better recon on that than I would. I want to share my screen here with you. I'm going to talk about your team right now. Is that coming up for you?
It is.
Perfect. Okay. So you've got some interesting, you got a lot of interesting pieces. Mixon went really big time last week. Jacobs was good. Allen's being Allen. You got good receivers too. You've got interesting buy issues though, which you probably already identified, and you're probably thinking about what you're going to do in those situations. So tell the team, tell the league about your team this year in 2020.
Yeah, I think I was obviously hoping Daniel Jones would be a little bit better than the worst QB2 in our league thus far. That was a bit disappointing. I don't know if anyone remembers, during the draft, I had to go move a pool table during the third round. And so I had my nice little chart. I was like, all right, here's who I'm going to pick. It's going to be Rodgers, it's going to be Burrow, or it's going to be Goff. And I just kind of checked out, moved the pool table, sat down, back in the car, looked to see who got picked. All of those guys had just gone, and I was about 2 picks away. So then I committed, all right, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I don't like any of the QBs available. I will go Jonathan Taylor. And then some jerk right before me scooped him up. And a little bit of a panic, was afraid that, what might be available by the time we rolled back through. So I went ahead and went with Jones, thinking he'd at least have a couple 40, 50-point weeks that would, help kind of propel me to victory. But, thus far, he's looked pretty terrible. The Barkley injury obviously doesn't help, having that dynamic player he could just dump it off to and get, nice chunks of yards from, especially late in games. So that, I think, hurts. I love what I'm seeing out of Allen, so that's made up for it a little bit. Like the running backs, in terms of Jacobs and Mixon, I was kind of thinking I would get one of those guys when I traded out of the first round, but to be able to get both of them, I was happy with that. The receiver depth is, I guess, something that I was hoping that I would be able to rely on during bye weeks, not so much have to rely on out of the gate because of injury. But I do like, it feels like I've always had just a bunch of wide receiver 2s and wide receiver 3s. And I don't think that really changed much this year, but kind of hoping that either Godwin or Golladay can kind of take that step into being, a consistent wide receiver 1. We saw Godwin last year, obviously, got out of the gate and, for the first half of the season was really probably wide receiver 1 in the league. So that was nice. I liked obviously the value there. I don't like what I have at tight end. I think they're both solid options, but it's one of those situations where pretty much every week you look at who you're starting and you know you're going to make the wrong decision. So that's one of those kind of frustrating things that, I'm okay owning maybe one of those guys, but having both of them, you feel like you're always kind of second guessing and overthinking. But all in all, I think what I've seen out of my team so far is kind of what I expect. I'm a team that is probably going to be in that 240, 250 range most weeks. I don't think there's a lot of, 270 to 300 out of this group. I just don't think that there are the kind of those whammy guys that can help put you over the top. I think the whammy watch shows me having 0 thus far on the year. And so I think that's kind of what I expected as well. But I've been, pretty pleased with what I've got thus far. Obviously, you had a nice week against me last week. Musa just crunched me. But that was, he's did that to Los last week too. So, you feel like you put a pretty good score up and you can't control what the guy does against you. So just kind of hope that your team, especially with this group, I'm hoping that once we get into bye weeks, I've got a lot of like week 6, week 9 conflicts there. I'm not too worried about that. I'm a little concerned about week 11, having obviously both quarterbacks on bye there, but you kind of, wait and see a little bit in terms of, I've got the number 1 waiver spot. So thinking that, worst case scenario with all the injuries that are happening, and, Trubisky will probably be back to starting by then because that's what the Bears do. They make shitty decisions. And so I think there will be someone available as we get a little closer to week 11 to solve that problem. But all in all, I think, the power rankings that have me in that like 5 to 7 range, I think that's comparable to kind of how I view my team.
Yeah, you're a very strong 2-2. I mean, you're a good 2-2. You could probably be 3-1. You wouldn't be 1-3 with 970 points. So I agree with all that. But then you transition that to look at your division. You've got an interesting division for sure. You've got your brother first off, which we'll come back to. But Moose's come out of the gate on fire. You're in a playoff. You're a playoff team right now. The season ended today, so that's good. You got 2 playoff teams. You've got your brother there, who is at 1-3, but has enough pieces, and then you've got Kenny there, who doesn't look like a big threat this year, but actually had a pretty nice, decent week last week considering some of the holes he has. So if you're gonna kind of look at your league and say, okay, my division, where do I fit in, and do you think this is how it ends up, kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, or is somebody going to take a fall or maybe make a rise?
I mean, I think in terms of at the top, I think Musa he's going to sit there. I think he'll be, someone that at the end of the year, I think we're going to be looking, at least to me, it looks like there's kind of 3 teams that have kind of distanced themselves from others in terms of just, a team that you look at, you say, here's a team that if they score 300, I'm not surprised at all. I think Musa is one of those. I think Los has one of those. And I think Jeff has one of those as well. With Los, I'm a little worried about the kind of what happens when Mike Davis goes back to the bench. But
big time pickup, Los.
Yeah, but I'm thinking in terms of our division, I think Blake and Kenny kind of battle it out for last. I think Blake probably finishes 3rd just because, if Adams can get healthy, having Russell, having Devontae Adams, if Herbert can keep putting up, 35, 40 points a week, which I don't see why he can't. He surprised me in terms of how good he's looked these first few games. I think
especially
Blake
being
has
from
one of
that
those
school.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and looking back on it, I think he had just atrocious receivers in college at times, and some of that was because of injury. But I'd watch games because you kind of have to. Down here, it's on everywhere you go. I mean, he'd make some remarkable throws. Guys just hit off their hands or, not making plays. And so I guess it's maybe I shouldn't have been as surprised as I have been. But, some of those deep balls he's thrown, clearly he's got the
missiles,
that next level arm strength. Yeah, kind of like
Josh
Allen has it too. Yeah, exactly. They throw it, and at times you can tell the receiver kind of shallows their route a little bit, thinking, I'm going to have to wait for this. And then at the last minute, they have to dart full speed, kind of recorrect and head downfield because, they didn't think the quarterback could throw it that far.
Because it's coming, baby. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, with Blake's
ahead.
team, I think he's got one of those 3 or 4 guys scoring 40 a week, and you can deal with some duds if you're putting up those kind of numbers. So I think he could have some weeks where he surprises people and gets some wins that maybe he shouldn't have. But I think at the end of the year, he's probably not better than about a 5-win team or so.
Have you given him any advice on some of these things, or are you just kind of letting him, just throwing him in the deep end and say, good luck, buddy? Because that we do have some relatively unique rules. The waiver system this year specifically is kind of unique. The defensive scoring, if you've never been in this league before, obviously it's probably a jolt to the system. 2 quarterbacks isn't the norm either. And the whole keeper, value, all of that stuff. I mean, how much of a tutorial have you given him? Or has it just been, hey, listen, you're in, buddy, but good luck because we're all competing for that grand?
I mean, I've tried to kind of leave it up to him. I'm always sensitive to like the insider trading kind of rhetoric. And, I'm really hesitant to reach out to him and try to, talk trade or something like that, just because, if it looks one-sided, you're going to get a lot of pushback in this league because people overreact to, what in hindsight turned out to be trades that benefited one owner, and that owner just gets completely destroyed in terms of the text strands that go back and forth. So I've tried to, give him things that I think he needs to know in terms of, waivers. I don't think I fully understand those. It seems like our site changes every couple of years in terms of, the functionality of first come, first serve free agents when we get to that point. So I've kind of told him this is a crapshoot. You're just going to have to, get some experience and figure this out as you go. But really, if he has questions, I'll answer them. But I'm kind of, leaving that in his court in terms of I'm here to help. But I think, he can reach out to other owners as well so that you can kind of get a couple different perspectives.
Have you made any trade offers here in 2020?
I have not. I've historically been, I think if you just look objectively, someone who makes moves too early in the process. We don't have to look back too far. I think the Jubilee year, I drafted Zeke Elliott, Michael Thomas, and Travis Kelce as 2, 9, and 10. And if I just kind of gone with the stand pat approach, who knows what I could have done in that time in terms of, throwing out a competitive roster and, making some playoff runs. But instead, trying to maybe look too far down the road and either increasing potential keeper value or trying to solve bye week issues that are 5-6 weeks away. Just making some, with the benefit of hindsight, really stupid decisions. So I'm trying to kind of maybe overcorrect there. I'm not really interested in making a lot of moves. And, with what's happened the last couple weeks in terms of postponements and things like that, I think it's, at least for me, I'm a little bit more hesitant to want to, pull the trigger and maybe give up on a Godwin, a Galladay, a Chark, someone like that who does have a lot of value, because, if this year doesn't count for anything, there's not a lot of benefit for me maybe trying to grab maybe a more consistent wide receiver 1 that's a first round keeper if 3 weeks from now, we've had 6 or 7 cancellations or postponements, and we decide that this year's kind of a bust at that point.
We do have some breaking news, Wade, though. Just came through, just got a text. And this is not really breaking news because I think we would assume this would be the case, but Justin Herbert has been named the full season starter for the Chargers. So that's good news for Blake.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so now some kind of spitfire questions. If you could pick one former owner, SKFL owner, to come back into the league, who would you pick?
That is a good question. I would probably go with a guy that was always just super nice to me. It was fun to watch him get riled up. I think, he and Casey had a fun dynamic, and that was Les. Les was a guy that I think, back when I was in the area and able to make it to Turkey Bowls, he was a guy that was a lot of fun to have in the league. And I'll never forget the draft at your house when Gist got up and told that dumbass joke using Timbuktu. And then an hour later, Les gets up, having apparently missed that portion of the evening, and started down the same road to tell the same dumbass joke. So I think that would be a guy. Yeah, that would be a guy that I would probably give the nod to, although Aaron Olson's god-awful stand-up comedy attempts were also, in hindsight, just sort of like a train wreck in a good way. Like, you couldn't really look away. It was so over the top bad that it somehow became good. So I'd give him honorable mention.
My only knock on Olson is that it was the same material every year. It was the same Gary Shandling, how about now joke. Or Denny's waitresses. I can't remember what it was exactly.
That's what it was.
I agree with you on Les. I still talk to Les, quite a bit offline, of course, because he's not in the league anymore. But he would be a great addition. He's a big sports fan, and hopefully there's even rumblings of potential additions, and those two names have been mentioned, which I think would be welcomed by the entire league. So if we were another kind of spitfire one, this probably is an easy one, but so what I'll say is you got to pick one. This is probably a terrible question, but pick one person at quarterback, running back, and receiver that you would love if we had a Jubilee next year.
So I think at quarterback, obviously looking at what Russell Wilson's done this year, that's been amazing, but I'm never, maybe this is tipping my hand. I'm never going to be able to draft Russell Wilson out of fear that I will jinx him and cause the injury.
For sure.
Right. So for me, I think I've got the guy that I would want going forward, and that's Josh Allen. I think, the rushing yards upside, but also the ability to just chuck it downfield. I would feel terrible if I drafted Mahomes and derailed, possibly the greatest quarterback of all time. So he's kind of in Russell Wilson territory for me, whereas
so you're saying a lesser player just so you don't want to hurt the future value of some of these other guys.
Yeah, the emotional shrapnel of ruining a player's career. I think
shrapnel.
Allen kind of comes off at times as a bit arrogant and cocky, so if that were to happen to him, it's Buffalo. Who gives a rip? But that's a guy, probably one of my favorite guys that I've owned, just because, he's like the perfect fantasy quarterback. And this year he's kind of turning into an actual, good NFL quarterback as well. But one of those guys who can just put up ridiculous numbers, one 70-yard bomb can get you kind of flip your game. And so I would say he'd be a guy that I would probably, want to own at quarterback.
Well, hold on. Scrap the rest of the question, because the avenue you went down was even better. Talk about some of those guys, if you can remember, that you've really enjoyed owning. Like, man, I was really pissed when I couldn't keep this guy, or he retired, or whatever happened.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like I've had two. Well, one wasn't even really a player, but when I first came into the league, I'd never done really any live fantasy draft or anything like that. I'd signed up for leagues, but a lot of times I'd forget when the draft was, and I was like 18, 19 years old, so didn't really know anything about doing the prep work or anything like that. but I got saved by the Bears defense. And so that was for
You
me.
had them in their heyday?
Yeah, that was, there were times where Rex Grossman would throw 3 interceptions and wouldn't even score a touchdown. And the Bears defense would score 2 touchdowns and they'd win the game. I mean, they were incredibly dominant. And, I think they helped me get to the playoffs with a team that I had no business making the playoffs with. So they were a team or a sort of player that I really liked owning. But I think obviously he was one of the first guys to really just throw away his career with domestic abuse. So I don't look favorably upon him now, but at the time, I think Ray Rice was the guy that, I if I had one player who I thought, was kind of my main sort of superstar, would be him. He was a guy that I had for I think 4 or 5 years, kind of during the prime of his career. He was always an RB1. At times he was kind of that, top 4 running back, catching a lot of passes out of the backfield, just kind of an all around really solid player. So he's probably, in terms of production and someone who I enjoyed owning at the time, I think he's top on my list of guys that I've owned.
So this is the Bears D, Ray Rice, and Josh Allen. It's a pretty good trio.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for a receiver that I can own and say that here's the guy. That's the position that I've just historically felt like they've all been, borderline trash, and kind of put me in the, even when I've had the strongest group of receivers, I'm still probably 5th in the league or something like that in terms of rankings.
Yeah, and that's with drafting Michael Thomas too. The what ifs that must haunt you at night, Wade, just dancing through your mind as you try to get some sleep. Right. I know you've been on the forefront of some changes. You and Yusuf have probably been the two most vocal on, hey, can we change this? Can we change that? And I think behind the scenes, a lot of this stuff could be happening. Last year, you mentioned about maybe we just trash defenses or kickers or a combination thereof. If there's one thing you would change tomorrow about the SKFL, what would it be?
I think it would be getting rid of kickers and defenses and adding a flex. I mean, to me, kickers are the biggest waste. I mean, a good kicker scores you 15 points in a week. A bad kicker scores you maybe 3. There's no predictability there in terms of who's going to have a good week from week to week. It just seems like, with us scoring 250 points, unless we're going to increase how much kickers score, it just seems like a worthless position to me. And then defenses, I've had a defense. I had the Bears, I had the Ravens during a good stretch of when they were good also. And so I've owned defenses that have been game changers. And so and then the last few years I've owned defenses that it seems like get outscored by a kicker if I start one. And so I feel like I've been at both ends of the spectrum, and it seems like for where they get drafted consistently and for the turnover that exists at that position, to me, I'd rather have another position player that I'm going out and kind of, trying to read up on during the off season and, trying to build depth that way instead of, stumbling upon the Colts or, the 49ers or whoever it is that is going to have a good year. You look at the Jaguars when they were just dominant, and then the next year Casey picked them in the 3rd round or something like that. And
not a good draft for Casey that year.
No,
Chris Hogan, I think, was involved somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I've made plenty of those picks as well, where you say it and people are like, oh, okay, he was serious. That was kind of, I think Kenny did that with the Gronk pick this year. I don't want to kill the guy on that. I'm sure he wishes he could have that one back too, but
we've all stubbed our toe.
Yeah, exactly. But to me, defenses are just, I don't like the volatility and the fact, I guess, the level of importance that they play. You get a defense that comes out and scores 60 because they play against Sam Darnold and the Jets. It's like, okay, how good was that defense really? Or was it just Sam Darnold is a complete piece of shit? Like, it's sort of to me, it can play too big of a role in the outcome of our games. And it just seems, too sort of trivial from week to week.
Totally agree. And I know we're going to have a commish pod at some point where Casey, Ian, and whoever the hell the other commissioners are going to jump on there. I think they have some ideas they're going to put forth, and some of that stuff may be on there, which is exciting to me. So I'll give you one more question, Wade, before I let you go and get back to doing lawyer stuff. But, Jeff Tager and I are going to do a pod at some point where we're going to kind of rank the draft locations from worst to best, in our opinion. Is there one draft that stands out to you as like, man, that was my favorite draft?
Oh, that is a good question.
And you can mention a couple too.
I mean, I thought the Jubilee was a lot of fun just because of what it was, and just kind of everybody heading to a location where there wasn't really anything else to do other than kind of like nerd out about football. I did like the Coast draft as well. I thought that house worked really well.
It's awesome.
Trying to watch the McGregor boxing match was a bit maddening in terms of how shitty that connection was, but that's what happens on the Oregon coast. So I would say at least the two that come to mind for me were probably those two in terms of my favorites.
Yeah, definitely two excellent drafts. The destination ones kind of stick in your mind a little bit more just because there's just more time and more stuff that you're doing, and good Madden stuff on one of those as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, Wade. Well, thanks for joining, man. This was fun.
Thank you, Rob. Anytime.
All right, man. Well, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Sounds good. Bye.
Good luck this week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.